want to start off this morning kind of pointing out why this is here. This is an important date for Jesuits around the world. 30 years ago this morning, Army commandos invaded the University of Central America in El Salvador, roused the sleeping Jesuit community, sprayed them with machine gun fire in the garden lawn. The victims included 6 Jesuit priests whose names are here, and their housekeeper and her teenage daughter. For years, the Jesuits had angered the ruling elite by siding with the oppressed in the bitter social conflict that divided the country. Spanish-born Father Ignacio Examen, rector of the university, had emerged as a particularly effective advocate of national dialogue and a critic of injustice. For his efforts, he was derided by the right-wing propaganda as, quote, the brains of the, quote, communist movement. The Jesuits were no communists. They were priests who struggled to live out the church's preferential option for the poor and who had committed themselves to the Jesuit mission, which is service of faith and the promotion of justice. They had committed the university to this mission, believing that in a world of conflict, a Christian university must stand with the victims of violence. The Jesuit-run university was among the targets of a rebel offensive that spread to the capital city. The massacre of these martyrs was the grim conclusion of a decade that began with the death of Archbishop Oscar Romero. Peace negotiations begun the next year were concluded in 1992. And this is from Father Ignacio Examen. Open your human heart, your Christian heart, and ask yourselves the 3 questions Ignatius of Loyola put to himself as he stood in front of the crucified world. What have I done for Christ in this world? What am I doing now? Above all, what should I do? So this is the memorial we celebrate today. Susie said to me, she wanted me to give something to you about how to be reflective on your work, reflective of the way God works in your life. And there's no better way to do it than to present to you the prayer of the Examen, which some of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with. So this is going to be kind of a review, and what we're going to do today is I'm going to present this to you, what this means, a way to do it, give you an opportunity to do it, and then to come back and kind of share how it went or ask any questions, okay? Now, it's important to start off to say that what the examen of conscience or consciousness is, it's not what we do before we go to confession. Okay, what we do before you go to confession is roughly, you go through the 10 Commandments and the precepts of the church, see where you've come up short, and then you go to confession to confess those sins. This is an examen of consciousness, an examen of awareness, kind of basically answering the question, where have I found God in my life today? How have I responded or maybe failed to respond to his invitation? To serve him, to love him, in others especially, okay? So that's kind of roughly what we're looking at. It's a process that Ignatius considers to be very, very important, very important. So we're going to go through this. Let's see if I'm not all this savvy with welcome speaker. So that's who I am, okay? I was a Jesuit novice director for 10 years. So I ran a seminary for 10 years and guided young men who came to the Society of Jesus for 10 years. By the time I was finished with this job, all the Jesuits in formation in our province had gone through the novitiate with me, poor guys. And now I am sentenced to live with some of them periodically. They may be my superior one day, so I hope they treat me well. Now, this is going to show you that this is a little dated, this PowerPoint. This was, I put this together at the last parish I was at when I was at Most Holy Trinity in San Jose. And I have, now it's going on about 25 years experience as pastor, actually 24 years as pastor. So that's basically who I am. All right, the Examen Prayer is, as I said, the examination of consciousness, awareness. We go through our lives so often not paying attention to most of what happens to us, most of what happens with us. We just kind of plod along. This is kind of, we're such busy people. It takes time to stop and reflect. So there's the importance of mindfulness, that we just don't let the experiences that we have just kind of drift out there. As one director I had one time, he talked about our personal experience. Everything is grist for the mill. Everything is grist for the mill. Everything is worth something. Everything, it's like a puzzle, and every bit of our experience is part of the pieces of the puzzle, which gives us a fuller picture. But it takes work to be mindful, to put ourselves into the experience as it's happening right now. Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living, right? It's just kind of like chaff in the wind, just kind of blows away, and we just keep on plodding along. This Examen Prayer helps us to pay attention to the movements of the Spirit in our lives. We can't discern the spirits, the good spirits and the bad spirits, unless we're reflective of what's going on in our lives. So a little working definition here. Now, these quotes come from a book that I'm going to show you in a minute. A book actually not written by a Jesuit, written by a member of another religious order, but a very good book about the examen of consciousness. The prayer of examen is the specific searching every day to find where God's love is active this day. Okay? The specific searching every day to find where God's love is active this day. I'll give you a little hint, too. If you do this on a regular basis, and this becomes part of your prayer life, it won't be something necessarily that's limited to when you do it, say, at the end of the day or the beginning of your day, as you reflect back on what happened. It will be ongoing. It will be something that as you go through your day, you will be more aware of what's going on. So it isn't something necessarily that you'll reflect back upon, but it'll be ongoing. You'll be aware of it. That's the goal, that we be aware not just at specific times during the day when we do this, but throughout our day. And it's to help us to see where God's leading, where God's love is leading today, and to discern what within me may be resisting that leading. All right? Where God's love is leading me today, to discern what within me may be resisting that leading. And to discover the growth to which God is calling me tomorrow, so that this deepest desire can be increasingly fulfilled. So what this really is, it's a looking back in order to look forward. I look back on my day to see the way God worked, the way I responded, and it includes a looking forward to what's coming up. How am I going to handle these situations tomorrow? These interactions I may have with people. Right? So this is kind of a working definition of what it means. A lot of words, but we break it down to be very, very simple. The daily examen of St. Ignatius of Loyola is a time of restful prayer. Of restful prayer. Restful prayer because it doesn't include a lot of digging. It includes just a lot of looking back, carefully, prayerfully. When I examine and evaluate the hours of my day in the light of my faith. So everything is in the context of my faith. I don't come to this without, obviously, an experience of faith. I come because my desire is to grow in my relationship with the Lord. It's my faith that has led me to this point. And so I do this in a restful way, evaluating my day in the light of my faith. In that context, always in that context. So these are the two books, actually, that I'm using. I'll leave them here on the desk if you want to look at them later. The Examen Prayer, Ignatian Wisdom for Our Lives Today. And as you go through it, if it looks like it's never been opened, it's pretty much true. I've read it, but my old copy I left in San Jose, so I had to order a new one. And thank God for Prime, Amazon. It came like before I hit the send button. So it's by Timothy M. Gallagher, OMV. And this little book, Prayer for Finding God in All Things, the Daily Examen of Ignatius of Loyola. This is from the Jesuit sources in St. Louis. So I'll leave those there if you want to peruse them. So let me just talk a little bit about the place of desire. I just mentioned to you before that this can't take place unless my desire is to grow in my relationship with the Lord, right? If I don't have that desire, this is not going to be something that's going to work in our lives. Desire and Ignatian spirituality. I have a story that really kind of highlighted this for me. Ignatius, first of all, speaks a lot of desire when he talks in the spiritual exercises. Comes basically down to what do you really want? What do you really want? And that might not be what God wants you to do, but if you're able to identify what you really want, that's a good place to start. That's a good place to start. So this permeates Ignatian spirituality. I had a novice one time who asked me, he said, I can't figure you guys out. I said, well, what's that? He said, you're always saying you need more priests and more religious, and so I got in contact with the vocations office, and they contacted me once, and then they didn't pursue this. They didn't pursue it with me. It was like they could kind of care less whether I signed up or not. And that signaled to me that this permeates the Jesuit spirituality. It went back to the man, basically, to say, how much do you really want this? How much are you going to pursue this? How much do you really want to become a Jesuit, to do whatever? The initiative is up to you. The grace has been given to us by God, but the initiative is on our part. We have to pursue this. So nobody's putting a gun to your head to do the examen or to grow closer to the Lord. This is up to you. Where is your desire? And to get in touch with that desire is really a motivation for us to continue, St. Ignatius says in the very first paragraph of the spiritual exercises, seek and find the divine will in the disposition of our lives. That's the purpose of the spiritual exercises. But it ultimately points to where's the desire on your part? How much do you want this? That's the question. And that's kind of the question I think we always have to ask ourselves. How much do I really want this? How much do I really want to grow in my spirituality? How much do I want to grow closer to the Lord? How much do I really want it? Because it's going to cost me something. When I ask that question, and if I say I want it a lot, it's going to cost me a lot. But is it worth it? Is it worth it? So, why is this prayer of the examen important? You may know that Jesuit formation is a very long process. I entered right after high school, so it was 12 years. 12 years from the day I entered to the time I was ordained. And technically, in Jesuit formation, I still wasn't out of formation. And that's a whole other story. That took another 13 years. So I was like 24, 25 years in the society before I was finally finished with formation. But at least to ordination, 12 years. And so when I would welcome a new class every year of novices. They would enter sometime in August. They would come on a Sunday. They would come with their families. We'd have a nice party for everyone, and then everybody would leave. And then in the evening, these guys that had just arrived, we had just kind of a little gathering, nothing too heavy. And the next morning at 9 o'clock, the very first conference they have as Jesuit novices in the Society of Jesus is how to do the examen. That's how important it is. Ignatius said this is the most important prayer for us as Jesuits. If we're sick and we can't put in our hour of prayer a day, we at least have to do the examen. We at least have to ask and seek to find where God has been in my life today. That's how important this prayer is. It's the very first conference. So it's important because it allows us to find God in all things. This permeates, again, the spiritual exercises, finding God in all things. Even finding God in our own sinfulness. How do we do that? Well, if we were really close to the Lord, if we really feel that relationship, not unlike your relationship if you're married to your spouse, when there's a rupture in that, when there's a break in that, you really feel that. You don't have to go somewhere to read about it. You feel it. So even in our own sinfulness, when we break off our relationship with God, we feel that absence, that distance, that separation. So it's in the breaking off of that relationship that we discover this is what we need in our lives, and we move back to the Lord. This is important because it develops a relationship with the Lord on a daily basis, in a restful way, constantly probing, not digging, but examining, reflecting on the ways God works in my life. The simple ways, the complicated ways, but it develops that relationship. Just like any relationship or any friendship that you have, it develops over time. It goes deeper over time, depending on how much you want to invest, depending on what your desire is, what level you want to go to. So, as we start off, the first part of this prayer is always gratitude. And at this time, I'm going to need some volunteers to help pass out some sheets. Now, what you're going to receive right now is kind of the scaled-down version of the examen. We're going to go into detail on each of these questions. When I finish talking, I'm going to ask you to spend some time going through and reflecting on these questions, okay? There are many ways to do the examen. There are books, there are articles that have been written on the examen. This is just a very kind of scaled-down, simple way, Cliff Notes version. I had to stop and remember what that was. So, we start off always and everywhere with gratitude. Ignatius says it's the greatest of all prayers, the prayer of gratitude. And personally, I really believe this for this simple reason. You may have heard me say this from the pulpit, that when we are grateful, we are in the present moment. We are not anxious about tomorrow. We're not guilty about yesterday. We are in the present moment. And God communicates with us only in the present moment. God is here with us now. How difficult it is to remain in the present moment and experience the presence of God. But the easiest way to do that is to be grateful. We are grateful for what we have before us, realizing that all that we have comes from God. what Ignatius says about gratitude or the lack thereof. He said that the greatest sin is a lack of gratitude. That's what Ignatius said. The greatest sin is a lack of gratitude. So the flip side of that would be, I think the greatest prayer is one of gratitude, as it keeps us focused on the present moment, grounded in the present moment, where God encounters us. Realization that the initiative comes first from God. It always comes first. God is the one that initiates with us first. And he invites us, we are invited to respond to that initiation, that initiative. The realization that the initiative comes first from God, to love him, to serve him. It's 1 Thessalonians 5. It also, when we are grateful, it allows us to realize that God is God and I am not, which might seem kind of obvious. But how often do we live our lives where we think we have to control things, we have to solve things, we have to do things, we have to make it happen? God is God and I am not. There's a great relief in that. There's a great relief in that. So the first question, as you begin, would be simply this question. Lord, I realize that all, even myself, is a gift from you. Today, for what things am I most grateful? Very simply, very simply. Being very concrete. For what things am I most grateful today? Might be overarching things like my health, or the sunshine, or it might be something just very, very subtle. A greeting you received from a person, a thought that you had about a friend that you hadn't thought of in a while and offered a prayer for him or for her. Could be expansive, it could be very, very simple. But taking a moment to start off with gratitude. So that's the first step. Now, let me just say that in doing this examen, there are kind of five steps. And doing it for the first few times, it seems very mechanical. I'll let you in on a little secret. If you've ever done the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius, it can seem very, very mechanical. That's why you shouldn't buy a book of the spiritual exercise and just kind of read through it. Not going to make a whole lot of sense. It's very mechanical. But there's wisdom to kind of that mechanical way of doing things. In the examen, there are 5 steps. You may find that there are times in which you spend the whole time just on gratitude, and that's fine. Or you may find yourself spending more time on one step than another some days as opposed to other days. That's fine. But I think as you begin this, it's important to go through those 5 steps, be familiar with the 5 steps, because they build on each other. But always starting with that great prayer of gratitude. So then, after the prayer of gratitude, we ask for enlightenment, asking for the grace. Ignatius is very big on this. In the spiritual exercises, as you go from meditation to meditation, Ignatius says very clearly, you need to ask for grace. And he spells out the grace you're to ask for. And I've had, people that have been like novices in the exercises, well, that's kind of like putting a gun to God's head, He said, no. Ask for those grace. It seems very mechanical, but do it. Just do it, and you'll see the wisdom of it. And when you ask for a grace, realize that it may come during your prayer, it may come later on in the day, or it might come a week from Tuesday. But Jesus tells us that we have to ask, knock, and the door will be open, to ask for what we need. So in this case, the grace you ask for in the examen is for a deeper insight, to be really honest with yourself as you stand before God. God knows where you stand before him before you even open your mouth. But oftentimes we play this game of deception. We don't want to be honest to ourselves and with ourselves. for deeper insight that we may act, So it's asking for the grace to know myself better, so ultimately it will affect the way I respond to God, the way I act, the way I treat others, perhaps. And never ask a king for a small gift. I like this story. There was a time when an American golfer, some famous American golfer, went to Saudi Arabia, and he was commissioned to go around the country and offer these kind of, I guess you'd call it workshops on how to play golf, I don't know, training sessions. And so he was doing that, and someone from the royal family, which seems like everybody in Saudi Arabia, approached him and said to him, "The king is very pleased with what you're doing, and he wants to give you a gift." And the golfer said, "You guys are paying me handsomely. I don't need anything. I'm very happy doing with it." No, the king insists. A gift. What would you like? So he says, "Well, how about a golf club? You can always use an extra golf club." So, okay, fine. So after he finishes his round there, he goes to the king, and one of the princes comes out with this wooden box. And he thinks to himself, what's this, a retractable golf club or something, The guy opens it up, and it is a deed to a golf club, like Phoenix Golf Club. It's a golf club. Never ask a king for a small gift. He gave him a golf club, the deed to a golf club. So don't be afraid about asking God for what you want. God is always gracious. God is never cheap. I mean, we look at the miracles that Jesus performed, whether it was the wedding feast at Cana and all the water he turned into wine, or the people that came to him because they were hungry, and he multiplied the loaves and the fishes, not so that everybody had one piece, but there were 12 baskets full left over. So realize that's the God we're dealing with. So never ask him for a small gift. He's expansive. You be expansive. Don't worry about it. If anybody could provide, God can provide. So this is the second point where we ask for the grace to be really honest and to open our hearts, So this is the second prayer. Lord, open my eyes and ears to be more honest with myself. Today, what do I really want for myself? What do I really want for myself? Maybe to be more charitable, maybe to be more generous, maybe to be more understanding, more patient, more giving. What do I want? Today, specifically today, what do I want? After I've given thanks to God for what I've received, what do I really want and need? So, that leads us to the examination, the part in which I examine what's going on. Again, it's not a digging, it's not going through the 10 Commandments, as much as it is asking myself, where has God been present to me this day, and in what ways? Where was God in all of this today, and all that's gone on? Most people do this at the end of their day, but you could also do it at the beginning of your day, looking back. Those are kind of the two kind of bookend times. But as I say, if you really get good at this, and this becomes a real routine in your life, you will find that you will be reflective throughout the day. You will recognize things you didn't recognize before. You will see the fingerprints of God on things you never thought they could be there before. But this takes a while. As I say, in the beginning, it might sound fairly mechanical. Toward what is God calling me today? Toward what? And then, I ask, how did I respond to this call? How generous was I? Where in my day was God calling me? And how did I respond? Were there inclinations and thoughts this day not of God? And this helps as I look back. This helps as I look back on things. Things may start, or decisions I may make may have seemed to be with the good intentions of my heart, but they end up in another place. And so we go back and look at that. How did things go wrong when my intention was to do good and it just went off the rails? If there were, was I able to discern and resist them? Did I feel myself moved in a certain way during the day, which was not of God? Was I able to pick that up and resist it? What this whole process is about is seeking out the patterns in my life, okay? The evil spirit knows us very well. The evil spirit tempts us each in a different way, in a unique way. How does the spirit of darkness tempt you specifically? Pick up the patterns. If you pick up the patterns and you can identify it, you're able to resist it much more easily. You're able to see it from afar and put a stop to it. But it takes reflection. Otherwise, these things just kind of pass through our lives like water through a sieve. It makes no impression whatsoever. Was the use of my freedom in accord with God's loving desire for me today? How did I use my freedom? You are as good as the quality of the decisions you make. You are as good as the quality of the decisions you make. And all those decisions are made in the freedom God has given you. That's from Gallagher's book, say, page 79. So, this is the question, third question. Lord, show me what has been happening to me and in me this day. Today, in what ways have I experienced your love? In which ways have I experienced your love? Now, go on to a place of contrition, because as you know, we don't always respond to these invitations to love with generosity of heart. We fail oftentimes. Forgiveness and the celebration at the heart are at the heart of community. John Vanier. Does anybody know who John Vanier is? Yes. What did he found? What did he found? L'Arche. Yeah, L'Arche communities. L'Arche means the ark. His father was Prime Minister of Canada, and his father is being considered for canonization. And I think John Vanier also will be. John Vanier founded L'Arche communities throughout the world. They're community for the disabled. They are not institutions, they are homes. They are homes in which they move into in neighborhoods. There may be 5 or 6 people living in the house, maybe 3 staff and 3 core members, they call them. These are people with disabilities who are fairly high functioning, but it's just a very loving community. I would send novices, and I think they still do, to L'Arche communities, and it's a great experience for the novices because, you know, we tend to attract men who, like most men do, I suppose, solve problems, make it work better, right? So guys are entering the society from professions, you know, really kind of high poverty. And they go to a L'Arche community, and the first thing they notice is, this place is very inefficient. I mean, I could set it up so it would run much better. And I would always tell them, you're not there to tell them how to do it. You're there to do it the way they want you to do it. Get into that. And it really ends up being just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And most novices realize after being a month there, well, I'm not called to do this as my vocation, but the experience of working with people who are so dependent and yet live in community and out of the spirit of love. It's not a particularly religious thing. I mean, it isn't a Christian organization per se. It's open to kind of any faith. But it really is very powerful. Jean Monnier, who's the founder of the L'Arche communities. So when we talk about contrition, I just want to highlight what the grace, remember I said that in the spiritual exercise, every prayer every week has a particular grace. The grace of the first week of the spiritual exercises is an experience of God's love and mercy. As I review my life, as I review the fact that I am a sinful person as I stand before God, it's very interesting. Ignatius never uses the word guilt in the spiritual exercises as he asks the retreatant to reflect on his life or her life. It's always done in terms of shame and confusion. I'm ashamed because God has given me many gifts, and I've trashed those gifts. And I'm confused because God continues to give me gifts. You know, my own life, if I give gifts to somebody and they trash it, I'd probably stop giving it to them. God continues to give. So it's in shame and confusion, not out of guilt. Everything is projected onto the background of God's love and mercy. You know those, I don't know if they still do it or not, but the when they do the news, the daily news, and they do the weather charts, you know, and they're showing you the weather. You ever notice they always kind of stand off to the side? Because that screen, which is right there, they could just see blue. They can't see the projected map on it. They have to look at the monitor over here, and that's why they're kind of going like this, all right? So for us in the spiritual exercises, the God's love and mercy is that blue screen. The blue screen is our lives, and God's love and mercy is projected onto that. So it's in that context that we go and we ask for freedom. We ask for forgiveness, which leads to freedom. This is the real grace of the sacrament of reconciliation, all right? So sacrament of reconciliation isn't just simply you're going in, confessing your sins, receiving absolution, and doing penance. It doesn't work unless you experience freedom, unless you experience that freedom. And oftentimes that's the biggest hurdle for somebody as they come back and kind of repeat those same sins, not because they've done them again, but they just don't feel forgiven. The real grace is freedom. And when we walk in freedom, I'm sure you've all had experiences of having some burden lifted off your shoulders, and how it just makes life so much easier. And this is what we're looking for here. This is what we're looking for here, is that sense of freedom. The link in the scriptures of joy, of forgiveness and joy, every time there's a passage of forgiveness, there's an experience of joy. Jesus often links up the two, of a miracle which is performed, which leads to great joy. Also, your sins are forgiven. Go in peace. Very often this is tied into our image of God. You know, what is our image of God? When we think of God, who is God for me? Is he judge? Is he ruler? Is he creator? Is he friend? Is he disciplinarian? Is he the one that's keeping track of every little thing I do? You know, like a high school disciplinarian? What is my image of God? You know, that's always a good question to ask yourself, especially if you feel a lot of guilt and remorse. What is my image of God? If I stood before God right now, what would God say to me? Luke 15 is where Jesus speaks specifically of God. You know, we understand that Jesus came into the world to free us from our sins, to die for us. I think he also came, and I know he also came to show us who the Father was. And in Luke 15, we have those three wonderful parables of the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the prodigal son. We are very familiar with them So they kind of run off our back like water off a duck's back. And yet to the hearers at the time of Jesus, these passages didn't make a whole lot of sense, you know. No shepherd in his right mind would leave 99 sheep to go get one, because when he came back, he would just have that one. And the woman who lost the coin, why it didn't make much sense that she would spend more money on the party afterwards than the coin was worth. And then the prodigal son, prodigal means wasteful. It isn't about the son as much as about the father who's prodigal, who's wasteful with his love. And Jesus is saying in all three, this is who my Father is, right? This is who my Father is. So the fourth question, Lord, I'm still learning to grow in your love. Today, what choices have been inadequate responses to your love? Do you know? So it's a much nicer way, a much more gentle way, a much more merciful way of saying, where did I fail today? And which of my choices have been inadequate responses to your love? Where could I have done better? Where could I have done better? Okay, so this is the fifth point. Hope. This is looking forward. Remember, this whole process is looking back to look forward, but experiencing God in the present moment. Looking back in order to look forward. The prayer of spiritual progress, right? So our spiritual progress should never be something which is stagnant, where we ever feel like we've finally reached the promised land, because we haven't. It's always in terms of progress, always in terms of moving forward. Our experience becomes a source of spiritual growth. Our personal daily experience becomes a source of spiritual growth. This is the treasure trove of where God is in our lives. It's in our daily experience, in the highs and in the lows, in the ins and the outs, in the feeling closer to God, in the feeling estranged from God. These are all movements that we can detect if we pay attention to our experience. I allow the first four steps of the examen to illuminate the fifth. They're pointing forward. Now, some questions on this fifth point. Which spiritual initiatives will lead me most surely to growth? What invitations is the Lord giving me will lead most surely to my spiritual growth? What do I perceive God is asking of me as I move forward to tomorrow? How may I hope to choose wisely among many possibilities? And this is the wonderful thing about our freedom, the many options that we have. How can I choose wisely? As St. John tells us, not all spirits come from God. Not all of those spirits that feel good come from God. Oftentimes, the spirit of the evil one can clothe himself, herself, itself in good and make it look really good, and it's not. How can I be discerning? What specifically shall I undertake as I prepare for the coming day? As I look forward. This is always very helpful if I'm having a particular difficulty, say, in a circumstance or situation, looking at tomorrow and saying, you know, really asking God to walk with me in that particular experience tomorrow. Some people, as their morning prayer, will open up their schedule for the day and pray for each specific thing that they are going to do and ask the Lord to walk with them. I've done it before. It really helps, especially in days that are going to be difficult. Will I be able to live concretely the newness that I seek? Is it realistic, what I am desiring to do? Is it realistic? God's only going to propose to us stuff that's going to be realistic, that we could actually do. He's not going to expect us to walk on water. Only he walked on water. So this is the fifth question. Lord, let me look with longing toward the future. Today, how will you lead me to a brighter future? So looking forward to tomorrow. First 4 steps, point to the 5th. Now, just want to say one thing, what's called the particular examen. The particular examen. So you go through all this, you're doing it kind of in general, vast scope, and in the process of that, you may pick out one particular thing. Maybe you're having a difficulty with someone you work with, someone in your home, a spirit of, kind of an inclination towards selfishness. And you might just look at that and ask God to help you with that particular thing, especially the next day or the next week. So you try to change your relationship with someone, grow in that relationship with the Lord specifically. Connecting steps 3, which is the examen when you're looking at your life, with number 5. What's going on? Is there something particular that's going on that's bothering me that I'm asking God for specific help with in a particular way? So what the examen is not, as I mentioned at the very beginning, a self-centered relationship concerning my day, the I, me on the subject of God or of my life. It's not that. It's not self-centered. It's not an examination looking for a listing of events on which I pass moral judgment. It's not that. It's not a simple just taking stock, as probably most of us do at the end of every day, or a sterile return to the past. It's dynamic. It's dynamic because our lives are dynamic. God is continually working in our lives. This process helps us to find the ways God is working and to respond to that work and those invitations. It's not a search for what I have done wrong, a detailed examination of my faults. Again, it's asking myself, where has God been present in my life today? Where is God inviting me to go? What is God inviting me to do? How have I responded in the past day to those invitations? So there are 2 articles that I have here that I want to leave. You're free to take them if you will. They're the 2 articles. They're all stapled together. One is called Rummaging for God, Praying Backwards Through Your Day. It's an article from America Magazine. And the other is Examination of Consciousness, adapted from Choosing Christ in the World by Joseph Tetlow. So I will leave those up here. Before you pick it up and read it, you may pick it up, but before you read it, I'm going to give you an opportunity to do an examen now. And I think that's more important than reading about it. The important thing is you have an experience of doing it. And what I'd like to do is, so just a little review. Thanksgiving, grace, review, contrition, hope for tomorrow. Those are the 5 steps. And they're there in the questions that you have. Just do it. And Nike, just do it. So it is now 9:44. I'd like to give you like 15 minutes to do this quietly. So you may take a walk, you may go into our church where I think their baptisms are going on, maybe. I don't know if they are. But if they are, the church is really big, so if you're in the back, nobody will even notice and you won't be distracted. Or take a little walk. But I'd like you to do that for the next 15 minutes or so. Review these questions. Experience what it's like. No, come back here, get a little food, answer any questions you might have. Talk about maybe at your tables how it went. Okay, how does that sound? All right, so you have the questions. Give yourself, about, let's say 15 minutes, okay? Thank you. Please don't distract each other. Don't distract each other, just have it quietly. Thanks. Any questions or comments? Questions or comments, how it went?
Okay, gratitude for me was I walked over to Brophy, where my boys went 30 years ago, and just looking at our church today and seeing all that's going on here just gave me a sense of hope.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? As you see, this is something that needs to be done on a regular basis, so it's not something we just kind of land and touch down once in a while. Otherwise, it doesn't really become part of your life. Mary Kay.
When I was examining my day yesterday, I had a very positive experience with a patient that I had thought was going to end badly. And I remember praying beforehand, this guy's only going to be a problem if I make him a problem. It ended up being very positive. And then in the review of the examen of the day, it was like, did I really listen? Did I really listen? So on the one hand, I had tremendous gratitude because it was a very positive response. On the other hand, it brings back to me, okay, listening. And because that's the grace that I prayed for.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Other comments or questions? Yes. Okay.
Right from the start, when I was examining my day for the things for which I'm grateful, I was taken quite by surprise. I was pulled all the way back to my childhood, to a time and place. I was on a walk, and I was on my way to Mass, and I was just a little child, and I haven't thought of this in years, but I felt so close to God, and the fact that that came to me as I took this moment of gratitude for today, it was so powerful, it brought me to tears, and I really got stuck there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Did you want to make a comment? Did she say what you want? Oh, I thought I saw your hand raised. Maybe it was your hand that I saw raised. Okay.
Yeah. I find it very easy to do this here. Greg is strumming a song, and you're leading us through, and it's quiet, and you munch on a piece of food, and you can walk around, but that's not my life. Maybe you could give us some thoughts. Your life is as busy as mine, and probably as most people in here. How do you get into this when you've got a schedule which is twice as tight as it can possibly be addressed? And to get into this, I don't have the luxury of 2 hours every Saturday to duplicate this. So maybe you could give us some thoughts on that.
Maybe I wasn't clear. This should be like 10, 15 minutes. This is not a whole afternoon session. It's, just kind of a review. And it has to become a priority. Unless it's a priority, it doesn't get done. We always find time to do the things we want to do, right? Right. So if this has to become a priority, we have to carve out. Usually it helps to carve out a certain time during the day, and that becomes kind of the sacred time. Now, that time may move because of necessity, but finding the time and making sure it happens is what's most important. And as I say, 10 to 15 minutes at the most, 10 to 15 minutes, but it has to be a priority. Okay.
Father, I just wanted to give him my tip that we taught the children, and I still faithfully do it. Every day when I make my bed, I put a stone on my bed, a rock. And then when I come home, I can't go to bed without remembering to do my examen. And then in the morning when I make my bed and I put that stone back, it reminds me to do whatever I committed to that I needed to do better from that day. It's a dumb little thing, but whatever works for you, leaving a journal on your bed, whatever, carrying beads or something, but if you put it somewhere where it's a constant reminder, it helps.
Yeah. Thank you. Very good. And if it's a really heavy rock, then that really reminds you.
So I was examining like my whole week, and I'm a preschool teacher, so it was a bit of a rough week. I don't know, but the whole time that I was doing this, I was just like trying to figure out how can I incorporate this and make it into a lesson that's understandable for preschoolers. So as I was like, after I did my own exam, and I started like jotting down like a little prayer that I can try and teach the kids to help them go through this process as well.
Yes, you know, like for really young kids, you could always start off with, what are you thankful for? What are you grateful for? And then to throw out the question, where did you see God today? Boy, that could open up a whole lot of things, you know? So in many ways, it could be made very, very simple for them. But they get into the routine of being grateful and finding God, recognizing God. Where did you find God today? Did you find him somewhere? Where was he? What did he look like? Now, you can imagine kids, you know, kids' imagination will just take you anywhere on that.
I just want to say, I come here and I see so many people I've known for years, and thank God I'm so grateful for seeing them and being with them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Or yes, okay. We got a couple of them here.
What do you do when you ask forgiveness from someone and that person will not forgive you?
That person has free choice to forgive you or not to forgive you. What God looks for is that you forgive them in your heart, you know? And then you leave it up to God. Yeah, you can't force them to do anything, you know?
I was going to address the idea of time. For me, myself, I start my day already looking at my agenda for the day. So it's very easy to add in 3 or 4 minutes to that, not necessarily planning, reviewing that agenda, and add this piece of looking where God and what I'm grateful for as I plan for my day. And then usually around the middle of the day, I restock myself. So add another 4 or 5 minutes there when you're doing that, another 4 or 5 minutes at the end of the day. So I don't see it as something adding on. I see it as using the time that I already have allotted in a different way.
Yeah, the exam can be very, very flexible. Whatever fits into kind of your schedule and the way you would prefer to do it, that's the way you can do it. Whatever works best for you. As I say, as we presented here, it's very structured, 5 points, da-da-da. But after a while, you get into the flow yourself, and it becomes your way of doing it, which is fine. Anything else? Okay, well, I want to thank you very much. I don't know, Susie, if you have anything else on your agenda, but I have a couple of funerals today that I have to take care of, and some confessions, so, okay.
First off, we would really like to thank you, Father. Thank you for being here. Thank you very, very much for being here. I know we have many funerals, baptisms, many things going on today. Classes, there's a golf tournament with the Knights of Columbus, there are all kinds of things, so I can't thank you enough for being here. I do want to tell you...
Just let them know that the articles are here, in case you want the articles.
Oh, okay. Okay, will do. Yep. Okay, so if you came in and you weren't a member of XIV and you said, I've been a parishioner here for years and years, what is that? XIV is just Xavier Ignatian Volunteers. And the difference between you right now and the rest of the volunteers out there is that you're going to reflect on what you did. So when you have an opportunity because you just worked in the Marian shop and somebody just came and unloaded their whole story on you, or you're working with the children in the atrium, or you're helping out either greeting or being a lector or anything else over at the church, and you go back and you reflect on where God was in that moment, that makes you an Ignatian volunteer. That's the difference. So what we did ask was that if you weren't already signed up, to sign up, and that's just to keep you on our list so we can keep inviting you. And often there are emails that go out that say we need a little help in this area or that area currently, and if you want to sign up, you can. If you're already doing 10 other ministries, as many of you pillars of the church are, then don't feel like you have to sign up for one more thing. Do what you can do when you can and ignore the other ones, right? So we would like to do this more often. Do you find that that as we grow in our Ignatian spirituality as a group, this could be beneficial for all of you? And we hope you will tell your fellow volunteers, because I know we have so many different organizations represented here within the parish and outside the parish, that if you would invite them to be a part of this in the future, that would be fantastic. And then I have another little weird thing to ask. If anybody is interested in helping me out, I'm collecting some clothes to send with a friend of mine going to Uganda. And the children are currently homeless, but they're trying to create an orphanage for them. So I want to send a little bit of lightweight clothing with them, new stuff. I mean, I don't want to send them gently used. I want them to have what we would like our kids to have. So if anybody would like to help me, I can explain what our guidelines are going to be on that, and you can give me a call or an email for that, or catch me afterwards. Does anybody have any other questions? I would like to introduce the core members of XIV who helped put this together. Sue Klein did so much, including running for our breakfast and everything. And her husband, Tom, is also a member, but is working today, beside the many places you see him around. And then Frank Petroni. And if you guys would stand, Frank Rivera. And Katrina Abrams. And then Jennifer Kaler's child went into labor today and isn't here. And Kevin Murphy had to work, but there's a group of us that worked on putting this together, but we could always use more core leadership too. So if you feel called to that and think you could take this in a direction, or you feel called to help with some of the administrative parts of all this, so we can really help this to grow and make the vision happen, let us know. We represent all the volunteer ministries within the parish, all the volunteer ministries that the parish supports outside of our parish, and then 5 additional ones: St. Joseph the Worker, St. Vincent de Paul downtown, under Life Choices, both Maggie's Place and Lifeway, and Catholic Charities as well. And we have a Catholic charity event coming up. If you see yourself as somebody who wants to help with a Christmas party, it'll be a fun night. We could use help with that. So I'm going to keep on going with commercials if you don't stop me now. So just let me know if there's some area you would like to help. And I want to thank you all once again for being here. Now, you got off the hook earlier, and Father stepped things up because of all the funerals. The funeral reception that's going to be in here right after the 11 o'clock Mass is for Simon, the scholastic over at Brophy that many of you know, the Jesuit in training. I guess we all are that. But he's studying to be a priest, and he's working over at Brophy as a scholastic, and his mother passed away. Wow, I should have said that first, huh? Because I scared you all. Oh, gosh, I'm so sorry. Just realized I did that. Okay, so any questions, any comments, anything you'd like to share at this point? Well, thank you all for being here. We love ya.